Have you ever heard someone utter something so absurd that it fails to register immediately? That was me, seated across from my wife Danielle in our high-rise apartment as the city hummed below, attempting to discern whether I had misheard her. "I have a date," she announced, swirling her wine as though commenting on the weather. The fork in her hand moved with such practiced ease, carving into the seared salmon as if it were any ordinary Tuesday. Yet nothing about that statement was normal. Not to me. Not when we remained technically married. My instinct was not rage. It was not even pain. It was calculation, like hearing an alarm and pausing to trace the source of the smoke. I observed her, that lazy curl of a smile, the glimmer of confidence in her eyes. She desired a reaction. Expected one. Had likely rehearsed this entire scene. I did not blink. "So do I replied, setting my fork down without a sound. "With your sister." Her fork clattered against the plate like a coin dropped in a cathedral. It was the first genuine sound she had made all evening. There it was, the fracture in her mask, a moment of authenticity. Danielle blinked, her lips slightly parted. I could see her scrambling behind her eyes, striving to appear composed. But composure no longer resided here. Not after what she had just done, and not after what I had just said. You might expect me to raise my voice, to demand answers. Yet confrontation is a game for those who still wish to win. As for me, I had already begun playing a different game, one where the objective was not to salvage what we had, but to reclaim what she had attempted to take from me. Control. Without another word, I stood and walked away, leaving her untouched dinner and the stunned silence behind. I did not slam the door. I did not utter a curse. I simply moved calmly toward the bedroom. For if Danielle desired theater, I would give her silence. And if she craved emotional chaos, I would offer something far more devastating, emotional clarity. Now, perhaps I should step back a moment. My name is Marcus. I am 41 years old, a structural engineer. I am the kind of man who solves problems no one ever sees. The hidden fractures, the silent stresses, until a building is on the verge of collapse. I appreciate systems. I cherish quiet mornings. Coffee brewed before the sun has risen. I once believed that stability alone was sufficient to keep a marriage afloat, but I have been wrong before. And Danielle, she was an entire masterclass in why instincts matter more than logic. She used to be the kind of woman who spoke in ideas, not emotions. Abstract, charming, untouchable. I loved that once, that cool breeze of unpredictability. Until one day, I began to notice how often her unpredictability was merely control, wearing a silk scarf. We had been together for 8 years, married for 6. No children, no messy finances, just 2 high-functioning adults sharing a space. And now, here we were, sharing confessions over dinner as if it were just another Tuesday. Except this Tuesday had shifted something irreversible. As I stood alone in the dim hallway, the soft city lights filtering through the blinds, I knew one thing with a quiet certainty. Danielle thought she was playing with power. What she did not know was that I had already started taking mine back. I did not rush. That was important. Rushing would have signaled chaos, and chaos was Danielle's element, not mine. The bedroom was dark, save for the soft city lights spilling through the window blinds, carving pale stripes across the walls. I did not turn on the lamp. I simply walked to the edge of the bed, pulled off my watch, and placed it on the nightstand with mechanical precision. I could hear her in the dining room, frozen most likely, trying to decide if this was a bluff, trying to regain her rhythm. The silence between us was not passive, it was weaponized. I knew she would follow. She always did when the control began to slip. Sure enough, her footsteps came fast, heels clicking on the hardwood, the momentum of someone who had not quite decided whether she was furious or afraid. What the hell was that supposed to mean?" she demanded, bursting through the door. Her tone was half shrill, half breathless. Not a scream. Not yet, but close, I observed. I did not turn around. Instead, I reached for a drawer, pulled out a folded gym towel, and began laying out clothes for the morning. Calm, focused, practiced. She stepped closer. "Marcus, I'm serious. What does that mean? A date with my sister?" Still, I said nothing. Danielle's voice cracked, betraying something she rarely showed, doubt. "Are you even listening to me?" Only then did I speak, quietly and plainly. "Don't worry," I said, folding a shirt. She asked me first. That stopped her. A sharp inhale. She was processing, recalibrating. I could feel her gaze on my back, scanning for any tremor, any tell that this was some twisted joke. But I gave her none. I turned slowly, finally meeting her eyes. Hers were wide now, not just with shock, but with something colder, a new kind of fear. The kind that comes when you realize the person you thought you had wrapped around your finger has slipped the knot. "You're lying," she said. I didn't blink. "No, but you are." Her jaw tensed. "This is insane. You're trying to punish me for being honest." I tilted my head. "Is that what that was? Honesty? Dropping a by the way? I'm seeing someone over scallops." She scoffed, defensive now. "You think I should have lied instead?" "I think," I said slowly, walking past her toward the window. "You wanted a reaction. A blow-up. Something dramatic, because that would have kept you in control of the narrative." I paused by the window, hands in my pockets, watching the city briefly. "But instead," I added, turning my head just slightly, "you're in a story where I'm not playing the role you wrote for me." She crossed her arms, her shield. "You and her never got along." I gave a small shrug. "Maybe that's what you always assumed. But she saw me when you stopped trying." Danielle opened her. She opened her mouth to fire back, but nothing came out. That was a first. She looked around as if the room had changed, and she was suddenly unsure of her footing. And perhaps it had. Perhaps the power dynamic was shifting right there in the dark, and she could feel it as much as I could. "You think this makes you look strong?" she whispered. "Because it doesn't. It makes you look bitter." I turned back to her fully now, calm and grounded. "No, Danielle, it makes me look awake." And with that, I walked past her again, this time toward the closet. Not in anger, not in haste, but with purpose. She didn't follow. She just stood there. And for the first time in our marriage, she didn't know what move to make next. The house was unnaturally quiet. No music, no hum of the dishwasher. Only the soft murmur of the television casting flickering shadows across the living room walls. I'd left it on after my shower, volume low, tuned to some nature documentary. I wasn't watching. The glass of water in my hand had gone warm, untouched as I sat there on the couch with legs crossed, scrolling slowly through emails I had no intention of answering. Behind me, I heard her phone buzzing. She'd been pacing for a while, circling like a hawk above water it no longer trusted. Then, finally, I heard her stop. "Call Camille," she said aloud to her phone. Her voice carried that forced steadiness people use when trying not to sound rattled. I didn't react. I just took another slow sip. It rang twice. Then again. "Hey," Danielle said, her tone bright as if a switch had flipped. "Got a second?" I could only hear her side, but I didn't need the other to understand what was being said. Not this time. A pause. Then Danielle's voice cracked just slightly. "Wait, so it's true? You and Marcus?" She turned toward me, her eyes sharp, seeking some kind of denial in my posture. She found none. Another pause, and then Camille's voice finally pierced the stillness, just loud enough for me to hear. To capture her words. "It was not about you, Danielle. It was about someone finally seeing him." Silence. I did not turn to look, but I could feel it. Danielle's entire posture shifting. Her hand descended slowly, the phone lowering, her eyes fixed upon the floor as though she were trying to erase the shape of what she had just been told. That one sentence, simple and measured, was not a dagger. It was a mirror, and she despised what she saw within it. She remained there for a long moment, still clothed in the soft fabric of an evening meant for dinner, now transformed into a battlefield, her mascara lightly smudged at the corners from fingers that had rubbed her temples too many times. I finally glanced toward her. Her phone was still in her hand, its screen dimming. Her shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in something more perplexing. Uncertainty. That was new. Danielle did not do uncertainty. She dealt in narratives. Control. The art of the upper hand. Yet now, with the television casting slow-motion footage of migrating birds across the room, she appeared as someone who had just realized she was no longer the protagonist, and perhaps had not been for a long while. The balance had shifted not because of a fight, nor because of vengeance, but because Camille, with one single truth, had severed the notion that Danielle was the sun around which everything else orbited. She said nothing after that. She did not cry, nor did she storm away. She simply sank slowly into the armchair, elbows resting on her knees, hands dangling like loose threads, and stared vacantly at the screen where a snowy owl blinked slowly into the camera. For once, she did not feel the silence. And for the first time, she had no notion of what would come next. The apartment smelled of jasmine and memory. It struck me the moment I stepped from the shower, soft, familiar, curated, a scent I had not noticed in years, yet one I had once loved so dearly that I kept an old bottle upon the shelf long after it had emptied. Danielle was attempting to rewind time. I moved into the kitchen, the towel still draped around my neck. I found her there at the stove, barefoot in the pale blue dress she had worn the night we became engaged. It hung a little looser now at the shoulders, but it was unmistakable. She turned slightly, as though she had rehearsed this exact angle before a mirror. Her hair was pinned the way I once liked. Her lipstick was just enough. The perfume, my favorite, lingered in the air like a quiet question. "I thought I'd cook breakfast," she said lightly, her voice wearing a smile that did not quite reach her eyes, not like it used to. I did not answer right away. Instead, I walked past her and reached into the cupboard for a shaker bottle, scooping in protein powder and filling it from the filtered tap, just as I had done 1,000 mornings before. Routine felt safer than engaging with the cinnamon in the air. She placed 2 plates on the table, trying not to seem as though she were watching me, yet I felt her eyes trace every small motion I made. "You're not hungry?" she asked, a note of real uncertainty slipping into her words. I shook my head, tight-lipped. "I've got the gym after this." She hesitated. "You never used to go on Sundays." "I go now." A pause followed, a delicate silence full of eggs cooling on porcelain. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and tried again. "You remember this dress?" "I remember the version of us that liked it." The words landed harder than I had expected. Her shoulders dipped almost imperceptibly. Her hands dropped to her lap, fidgeting with the hem as though it might somehow change what she had just heard. I zipped my gym bag slowly, slipping in my phone and keys with careful precision. Her eyes followed every move. "You smell like the first time we danced in that awful little jazz club on Ninth," I added, softer this time. She looked up, hopeful. "But that scent," I said, hoisting the bag onto my shoulder, "doesn't belong to now. It belongs to a memory, and I'm not living there anymore." Her smile froze. I walked toward the door, pausing only to glance back. "I'll be back briefly. Don't wait up." Then I stepped out, the door clicking softly behind me. When the silence returned, it no longer felt delicate. It felt final. Danielle remained at the table alone, dressed in nostalgia, surrounded by the scent of a version of us that no longer existed. 2 plates, 2 eggs, 1 untouched seat. She reached for her wine, not because it was the right time, but because it was the only thing left on the table still willing to fill the silence. And across the apartment, the soft glow of a forgotten stove burner hummed quietly in the background like a song no one remembered how to dance to. It was the kind of morning that demanded nothing. No alarms, no plans, just pale sun slanting through the bare branches of the park trees. The city held its breath between winter's edge and spring's first signs. Emily was waiting by the bridge, the same place as always, hands tucked into her coat, her camera hanging from her neck like an afterthought. She smiled when she saw me, not wide, not eager, just enough to say, "You're safe here." We began walking without ceremony. She asked how I'd been. I told her I was getting used to the quiet. She nodded as though she understood more than I had said. Emily and I had history, the kind that never quite became a story. A couple of late-night coffees, a confession once, years ago, over whiskey and long shadows, her admitting she'd had feelings she knew better than to act on. I never gave her an answer, and she never pushed. Today, we did not need to explain anything. She snapped photos as we moved along the path. Low-hanging branches, pigeons mid-flight, the way my breath curled in the air, all without asking. She always said I had a face that told the truth when it thought no one was looking. "I saw one of your buildings," she said. "That glass one downtown. It looks like it's about to lift off." I smiled, a real one this time. I designed it to reflect the sky. It was fitting. We sat on a bench near the fountain. The water had been shut off for the season, but children still climbed its ledges, their laughter bouncing off the stone. "You seem different," she said gently. "Quieter. Maybe more like you've finally stopped performing." She didn't pry, just sat with me, letting the silence work the knots out. Meanwhile, somewhere across the city, Danielle was trying on masks. She pulled on one of my old hoodies, the one she used to steal on Sundays, walked barefoot through the apartment, made toast she didn't eat, and sipped coffee that had long gone cold. She stood by the window, mimicking the way I used to lean against the frame and watch the skyline. But where I had found stillness, she found static. She tried pretending it didn't hurt. She tried sitting in the quiet without reaching for her phone. She even rehearsed lines in the mirror. I'm fine. It's no big deal. I just needed space, too. But none of them sounded real, because pretending not to care is easy until you're alone long enough to realize someone else actually doesn't. Back at the park, Emily turned toward me. Did you love her? I didn't flinch. I don't know anymore. She nodded, thoughtful. I think that's a kind of answer. And for once, I didn't feel the need to defend or explain. We walked back slowly, our pace unhurried, two people moving through space without any expectations. When we parted, she placed her hand briefly over mine. You don't need to be okay right away, just honest. I nodded, watching her fade into the crowd, the camera swinging at her side. By the time I got back home, the scent of my cologne still clung to the hallway, and the faint sound of music drifted through the apartment. Danielle was seated on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, reading a book, though she wasn't turning the pages. She looked up. I nodded politely. She offered a small, uncertain smile. I walked past her in silence, and her smile faded. She had vanished before I'd even reached the bedroom. She waited until the lights were low. It was the kind of silence that draped itself over everything. Thick, intentional, as if even the city noise outside had paused to watch what might happen next. I was standing by the dresser, folding a fresh t-shirt into thirds, when I caught her reflection in the mirror behind me. She was leaning in the doorway. No words, just presence. The overhead light traced the slope of her collarbone. The silk of her nightgown caught the glow like candlelight. It was a deliberate picture, one we'd painted together countless times over the years. But tonight, it was missing something. Us. She stepped into the room slowly, as though approaching a skittish animal. I didn't move. I simply folded the shirt and placed it neatly into the drawer. Do you remember the first time we stayed in? She asked, her voice low and soft. I didn't answer. We were supposed to go out with friends, she went on, inching closer. But it was raining. You said you wanted to stay in and just be near me. She was beside me now. I could smell that jasmine perfume again, lighter this time, as if it were trying not to draw attention to itself. Her fingers brushed my arm. I felt them, cold and hesitant. I miss you, she whispered. I miss us. I finally turned. She reached up, her fingers grazing the base of my neck. Her eyes searched mine, not for lust, not even for affection, but for a lifeline. Proof she hadn't lost her last hold on me. But I didn't give it. I placed my hand gently over hers, removed it, and stepped back. Her breath caught in her throat. Danielle, I said softly, this isn't about anger or revenge or withholding. Then what is it? Her voice was too quiet to be defensive. It was laced with something heavier. What am I supposed to do? Just pretend none of it happened. I shook my head. No, you're supposed to understand that I'm already somewhere else. She blinked, stunned, not by anger, but by the calm in my tone. I'm not punishing you, I continued. I'm simply done trying to feel what I no longer feel. Her lips parted as if to reply, yet no words came. Deep down, she understood this was not cruelty, but clarity. I moved past her toward the bathroom and switched on the light. Behind me, the bedroom, our bedroom, felt suddenly colder than any affair could ever make it. Physical distance is temporary, but emotional vacancy, that is permanent. She remained there for a long moment, arms folded tightly across her chest, eyes fixed on the floor where my shadow once lingered near the bed. And when I closed the bathroom door, the soft click held no anger. It was final. Emily's gallery was tucked between two bookstores on a quiet street that smelled of aged wood and fresh paper, the kind of place where people whispered even when they did not need to. The exhibit was titled Unnoticed Things, featuring intimate still lives, shoes by a door, half-finished coffee, the wrinkled edge of a bedspread. Details most forget until they are gone. I entered quietly, nodded to a few familiar faces, and slipped past the soft clinking of wine glasses. Emily stood near a photograph of two empty chairs facing a window, her posture relaxed, her smile gentle. She was in her element, observed yet untouched by it. I had not expected Danielle to appear, though perhaps I should have. She stepped into the room like an accusation wrapped in heels and a designer coat, cutting a straight line toward Emily. Her eyes locked onto her as though the rest of the gallery did not exist. "Beautiful photos," Danielle said, her words laced with a sweetness only venom could produce. "You've always been so good at capturing what doesn't belong to you." Conversations around us slowed, not ceasing, but softening. People instinctively stepped back without quite realizing why. Emily did not blink. "Thank you," she replied, her tone composed. "I try to make quiet things visible." Danielle tilted her head in the manner of other people's husbands. The moment splintered like thin ice. Emily's expression did not alter, not so much as a flinch. She merely regarded Danielle with a patience that makes fury feel small. "I never touched what was claimed," she said, her voice steady. "I was simply seen when someone else chose to look away." Danielle's mouth opened, then closed. I was already halfway toward them, but there was no need to intervene. Emily required no defense. A flush began to rise in Danielle's face, not from anger now, but from dawning understanding. People were no longer whispering to shield her. They were watching, judging, observing her nod as the woman spoke, yet seeing her unravel, and she felt it. The control she had clung to, the narrative she had been crafting, it slipped from her grasp. "I suppose you're content with scraps," she muttered, her voice lower now. "Desperate?" Emily blinked once, then offered a gentle smile. "No," she said, "just not desperate for illusions." Danielle stood frozen, her mouth twitching, hands tightening at her sides. When she turned to leave, no one stopped her. She passed me without a word. I did not follow. Back at the gallery wall, Emily reached for a wine glass and took a sip, as though nothing had occurred. She caught my eye across the room and gave a quiet nod. Somehow, that conveyed everything. Outside, the night felt cooler. And somewhere down the block, Danielle vanished into the shadows of her own undoing, alone beneath a street lamp that did not bother to flicker back on. I did not pack loudly. No suitcases rolling down hallways. No dramatic boxes labeled with a Sharpie. Just a few clean essentials zipped into a black duffel, and a folded garment bag hung carefully by the door. Danielle did not ask where I was going. Perhaps she believed that asking would lend the act more weight. Or perhaps, in her own way, she already knew. The apartment had been growing quieter for weeks. There were no fights, no conversations, only the ambient hum of something that had run its course. When I left that morning, the refrigerator was still full, the bed still made, the plants still watered, yet none of it felt lived in. The rental was 10 blocks south, furnished and temporary. It had creaky floors and windows that let in too much streetlight, but it was mine. The quiet there wasn't sharp, it was clean. Meanwhile, Danielle hosted a party. It wasn't a celebration, it was a performance. She filled the living room with people I didn't recognize. Co-workers, neighbors from the building, who always smiled too widely in elevators. She turned the music up louder than necessary and set out drinks she barely touched. Her dress was red. Her heels clicked like punctuation. She laughed at things no one said. The apartment looked perfect, candles lit, glassware gleaming. But the air was wrong. The energy clashed with the walls as though the space itself was rejecting the show. People began leaving early. One by one, polite goodbyes were mumbled. Uber notifications lit up phones. The last couple stood by the door a moment too long, offered a vague compliment about the wine, then disappeared into the hallway. Danielle stood there alone in a room she had tried to fill with noise. The silence returned quickly, too quickly. The speakers still played something upbeat, but now it echoed, artificial and hollow. She walked to the kitchen, poured herself another glass of wine, and leaned on the counter. Her reflection in the microwave door looked tired. Not tragic, just worn. From my place in the rental, I texted the landlord a question about the heat. I folded some shirts into the dresser drawers, read a page and a half of a novel I wouldn't finish. I didn't think about the party, or what she might be wearing, or whether anyone had stayed to comfort her. I thought about how still everything felt. Everything was felt. How silence, when chosen, can feel like peace instead of punishment. Back at the apartment, Danielle turned off the music. The hum of the refrigerator took over. And for the first time since the confrontation at the gallery, she let herself sit within it. The quiet, the consequences, and the absence of someone who no longer needed to be heard to be gone. Her message arrived just after dusk. Simple, sparse, without punctuation. "Let's talk." I stared at it for a long minute, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I felt no triumph. only the steady calm of a man who had already made peace with the outcome. So I said yes. We met on the rooftop, our old anniversary spot, 15 stories up. From here, you could see the river and the train lines weaving their silver threads through the city's dark fabric. I arrived first. The wind was sharp but clean, the kind that clears the air more than it bites. Danielle appeared 10 minutes later, wrapped in a long coat, her hair caught in the breeze, her eyes rimmed in something that wasn't makeup. Or perhaps it was just smudged by hope and time. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in the hush between two city sirens, she broke. I never thought you'd actually stop needing me. The words did not land like an accusation. They felt like truth, a truth she hadn't been brave enough to consider until the silence outlasted the echoes. I did not respond right away. Instead, I looked out across the skyline toward the same buildings we once toasted with champagne from this very spot. Back then, everything felt full of momentum. Now, only one thing felt certain. I needed to understand something, I said slowly. And I needed space to do it. She stepped closer. So did I? I just didn't think it would feel like this. Her eyes welled up. Not performative, not manipulative. This wasn't a play for control. This was grief. I did not flinch. I reached out and gently took her hand. Not out of romance, but a recognition. An acknowledgement of all that we once shared, of all we attempted to build, and of what ultimately fractured beneath the burden of truths neither of us confessed in time. You were right, I murmured, my voice soft. We needed space. Her fingers tightened around my hand. So now what? I held her gaze. I just realized mine is permanent. Her breath hitched, and for a moment her mascara traced quiet paths down her cheeks, leaving faint streaks the wind could not dry. Yet I did not look away, for when love departs, it does not always slam the door. Sometimes it simply ceases to appear, and you understand you have been standing alone in the room far longer than you knew. Gently, I released her hand and stepped back. For a while, neither of us moved. Below, the city continued its breath, oblivious and alive. And above, the rooftop we had once claimed for forever became merely another place we used to visit. It arrived without warning, in the days when we still believed we were heading in the same direction. Just a plain white envelope slipped beneath the apartment door. Danielle now moved through the rooms like a ghost. No name, no return address, only her name, written for her alone. She lifted it with careful fingers, as though its weight might sear her skin. There was no seal, only a single fold, and inside lay two things, a photograph and a note. The photo was candid, natural in its posture. It captured Camille standing before a cafe, laughing with Emily, shoulder to shoulder in mid-conversation, each holding coffee cups as sunlight traced the edges of their hair. Marcus stood between them, gazing not at either woman, but just past the lens, as if already beyond that moment. His smile was gentle, present, whole. Danielle's fingers trembled. The note was handwritten, simple, 5 words, each drawn with care. Control isn't love. Never was. That was all. No signature, no plea, no cruelty, only closure. Slowly, Danielle sank to the floor, her back resting against the kitchen cabinet. The photograph slipped from her hand and landed face up on the tiles. Her gaze was fixed upon it, not upon Emily, nor upon Camille, but upon Marcus. The version of him she believed she would always have within reach. The version she had once kept tethered by calculated charm and carefully timed affection. But he was no longer that man, and now she was uncertain whether she had ever truly seen him at all. Outside, the city moved as usual. Cars passed, elevators hummed, lives unfolded in neighboring windows. Inside, time paused. She wanted to scream, or run, or do something to shake loose the weight in her chest. Yet all she could do was press her hand to her heart and let the silence settle. She did not cry, not then. Instead, she sat with the photograph in her lap and the truth ringing in her ears, as clear as the note in her hand. Control is not love, and love, it was already gone. She did not move for hours, merely sat there, legs curled beneath her on the cold kitchen floor. The photograph lay flat between her palms like something sacred. Not because it was happy, but because it was honest. By morning, the apartment felt like someone else's life. She wandered through it barefoot, every room humming with ghosts. The art on the walls, the stacked cookbooks, the candle holders with wax hardened mid-mount. Everything she had once curated now looked arranged for someone she no longer was. Even the scent had shifted. Her perfume had faded into the furniture, and in its place lingered only stillness. She picked up the envelope again, not to read the note. It was memorized now, but simply to hold something that had touched his hands one last time. Marcus had always been composed, quietly powerful. But what she had never understood until now was that his silence was not weakness. It was restraint. And now that he no longer owed her anything, that restraint had lifted. The message was clear. He did not hate her. He simply no longer needed her in his story. And that, more than rage, more than revenge, was unbearable. She did not reply. There was nothing left to say that would not ring hollow. And Danielle had never begged, not in words. But her silence now was thick with the echo of it. Across town, Marcus was carrying groceries up 3 flights of stairs. No elevator, no concierge, only chipped railings and a skylight that spilled light in a way the old place never had. The apartment was not much, floors that creaked in the corners, a couch with 2 firm cushions. But it was his. No ghosts. He set the bag on the counter and glanced at the framed photograph on the windowsill, an image Emily had given him. One of her quieter shots, just 2 empty coffee cups on a bench. No faces, only presence, absence, possibility. He liked how the morning light fell across it. His phone buzzed once, a calendar reminder. No texts, no missed calls, no drama. Just space. Later that afternoon, he met Emily for lunch. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet booth and conversation that did not circle back to pain. She did not press about Danielle. He did not offer. Some people know when a story is closed, even if the ending was never spoken aloud. They walked afterward, not touching, not defining, just walking. He paused once on the bridge, looking down at the water and the way it cut the city clean down the middle. A quiet thought crossed his mind. Perhaps heartbreak was not about being broken. Perhaps it was simply the removal of a weight. And maybe, just maybe, that absence was where clarity lived. Back in the apartment she once ruled, Danielle finally rose. She opened the windows and let in the air. The photograph was still on the counter. But for the first time, she did not pick it up. She let it lie there, unmoved, like something finally understood. If you have ever faced a silent betrayal, or had to walk away with dignity when it would have been easier to fight, leave a comment below. Would you have handled it like Marcus, or differently? Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that strike where it hurts and heal where it matters.